Hello, everyone, and welcome. We were having some technical difficulties with the sound on Tuesday night, so I am re-recording this at home. So if you are watching the replay and you missed Tuesday night's meeting, welcome. Thank you for tuning into the replay. This is going to be available for a week publicly, and then it will be in our archives. But if you are a CISD member, you will have access to this recording in your private portal, which we're going to share a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But thank you so much. My name is Crystal Eicher. I am the co-chair for CISD. This was originally presented by all of the board members, but you will get just me today for the replay, and let's jump right in. So the executive committee is fully formed now, and here are all of our chairs. The last chairperson to join our committee was Chelsea Floro. She was not there at our very first meeting, but she has jumped in as our fundraising chair, and we couldn't be more excited to have her. So here it is, and you can find more information about all of us on our website. So quick update on where we are today. The team has been working really hard behind the scenes to get everything launched. Just like starting anything new, it's starting a brand new nonprofit. So it is really starting a business up from scratch. And there have just been a lot of bureaucratic things that we've been working on behind the scenes, just a lot of goal setting. One of the new exciting things is that we've launched a new website. So we've got a new online hub that will have the ability for members to log in. We're going to launch a private education portal within the next week. So hope to have that up and running over the Thanksgiving week holiday, and then members will have login access to that. And so we're going to be able to announce new educational series, have a private online community for members, all kinds of really fun stuff going on behind the scenes. Plus the new website just looks really pretty. You'll notice that our meeting location has been changing, which was why we had kind of a last minute announcement for this meeting. Currently, we were informed that CISD meetings cannot be held on CISD property without paying a facility use fee. And as a new nonprofit with, honest to goodness, no funds to fully disclose, we are here at the mercy of volunteers donating their time, their energy, and their money. And we would rather go to services that help further the CISD mission, not pay for facility fees. So Grace Woodlands was really kind enough to offer us space this last month. We will be looking forward. Our next meeting will be in January. We are actually as a board meeting this week to figure out where that next space is going to be. So be sure to make sure that you're on our email newsletter, make sure that you look at the website for updated meeting locations. And then we're trying to add virtual options to that. And we just appreciate all of your patience as we work out those technical kinks. But we do have an upcoming meeting with Dr. Vinson on Friday to ensure ongoing communication and collaboration with district leadership, and hopefully iron out some of those gray areas that came into question about how the district can work with us. So stay tuned, and as we know more, we're obviously going to update the community and let you guys know more. So we do have some fun things on the horizon. I mentioned earlier our educational series. So we're working on workshops and resources designed to help our families be a little bit more empowered with knowledge, because knowledge is power, especially when you're sitting in those ARD meetings and sitting on the other side of the table, advocating for your special ed student. So your input matters. So if there is something if there are burning questions, if there are things that you'd like clarification about, that you'd like to learn more about, please send us an email, please reach out, DM us on socials, because your input matters, because we really want to tailor these series to what you guys are looking for, not just what we think that you need, okay? We're also working on launching our Champions program. So one thing that got called into question after our very first meeting is, who can be a member of SEPAC? Okay, it's a really great question. So SEPAC is really meant to be, and it's right there in the name, Special Education Parent Advisory Council. So membership for SEPAC is really closed off to just parents of special needs students. Now, I understand there's some overlap because there are a lot of CISD employees that are also parents of special education students. But also we had a ton of interest from community members, advocates, PTs, OTs, teachers. We've got great principals that have been showing up to the meetings, administrators, which is amazing. And all of us really have the same goal, right? So in the interest of keeping SEPAC very parent focused, because we are here for your best interest, okay? Not CISD's best interest. I would like to be for everyone's best interest, but really through the perspective of the parent. We're going to launch our champions programs. So we would love, and we're calling them our educator champions and our community champions. And so if you're an educator in CISD and you are either administrator or work for the district in any capacity, but you do not have a child in special education, we're going to invite you to become part of our education champions. So still make sure you're on our newsletter. There'll be more information about how to apply for that. Membership will still be free, but it helps us keep things very discerned on the back end. And when it comes time for voting, for input on directions on where we need to go, we really want to make sure we're centering parent voices in that, in those efforts. Okay. And then finally, we are ready to start accepting story collections. So this is something that we talked about at our very first meeting. And the idea of bringing our stories, and I'll kind of come over here to the next slide, is that we are here to collect the stories and data from families that are navigating the system currently, okay? Sharing your stories are going to help us identify those common challenges and barriers and help advocate more effectively for system improvements with a very data-focused point of view. Because I think, and I know from personal experience, emotions run very, very high here. We can't make changes based off of feelings, but we can absolutely make changes based off of data. We can also, it's also very easy for the district to dismiss feelings, but we can't dismiss data. So the data is where things become very important. And the way we pull through this data is by sharing your stories. So there is an online form and there's a QR code here at the end of this, and we will link it as well in our emails and on our website. There's a way for you as family members to share your stories, and we're going to identify very common things. And as a board, we evaluate that information and we start to identify common trends, okay? We as board members have inklings on where this data is going to go, but I mean, they're just hypotheses. Without the actual data to prove it and to back it up, I can't go anywhere with it, right? So we also would look for the opportunity to maybe connect families with your permission with similar experiences, which we would never do blindly. Your information is privacy protected. The only people that have access to this information is the board members who have all signed NDAs. We are going to be very protective of your information. As you're sharing information, we want to make sure that you're not sharing anything that would be a huge violation of your own privacy. Like, only share the information as it is relevant to the story. Be very careful about sharing diagnoses as well as your child's name. We want to make sure, and then as we share these things with district, we will not be sharing your child's personal information. Okay, most of this is to be able to identify things like, hey, and not just negative things. Okay, if you have positive experience or things that are going really, really well, I know in my child's middle school, their life skills program is incredibly functional and is really running on all cylinders. And that doesn't mean we're not without our issues from time to time, but I would say that they would be a very model example of somebody doing it very, very well. We want to identify those trends as well, because again, we learn by modeling what's working, okay? And then we learn by identifying what's not. And so then we can take those stories and we can turn them into action. So as we gather those insights and we analyze and identify things, then we have something to advocate and implement for, okay? And even though we've had a little bit of this hiccup with meeting on CISD property and what that's going to mean, Dr. Wiggins and her team have been incredibly forthright in saying that they want to continue to collaborate, they want to continue to communicate, they want to continue to talk to us. And so those meetings are still going to stand, that communication is still going to stand, but we really want to work with them to create meaningful change, okay? So with that, let's jump into what our presentation was for the evening, which was the 10 things every parent needs to know for an ARD. And I can tell you as a board, when we were discussing this topic and we were presenting the information, clearly there are way more than 10 things you need to know. It was really hard to narrow down this list, but we thought these were 10 really good points to be hitting on just to get started, okay? And like I said, there's more to come for this educational series. So as you see things or identify things, please, please, please reach out and let us know what you'd like to know more of. And then as always, if you have questions about any of this, we were not able to make it there live, please email us, please reach out to us to ask those questions, because that is what we're here for. All right, so the most important thing, you need to know the players at the table, okay? Understanding who is attending the meeting empowers you to ask the right questions to the right people, okay? So there are required attendees for every single ARD. So there are, parents are required to be there. Parent, or the child's guardian, that is the representative of your kid, right? Okay. There will be one general education teacher as your child gets older into the system. Obviously, they have more than one gen ed teacher. Like by the time they get to middle school, they've got 8 different teachers, right? Not all of them will be attending. There will be one representative from the general education program. And then there's one special education teacher or provider. So this could be your child's actual special ed teacher or their case manager. And then a campus district representative, which is usually an admin from the campus, okay? And then there's also your person who can explain the test results, and here in CISD, that's usually the diag or the diagnostician, okay? In other cases, other specialists might attend as well. If your child receives speech services, their speech therapist might attend. If they have adaptive technology, the adaptive technology coach might attend. OT, PT, counselors sometimes often attend, transition specialists. This is where it becomes very individualized to the student. Also, district representatives might attend as needed, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but you can also bring any member of the support team that you need to that table. You can bring an advocate, a family member, anyone who knows your child really well that can be there to support your meeting. It's usually best practice to give the school a heads up that you are requesting that, but you are an equal member of this ARD meeting, okay? We never want you to think about the ARD as a table where everybody's talking at you. They're talking with you, okay? And actually, if you think of the ARD meeting as kind of a board of directors, you really should think of yourself as the president of the board, because really you are here at the center of all of this as the main representative of your child. So you want to make sure that you're speaking up, asking questions, and really letting your voice be heard through all of this, okay? In understanding your parent versus school roles, really understand that they are there. Everybody kind of has 2 different roles and interpretations and perspectives here. So our board member, Haley, was the actual one that presented this on Tuesday night, and she has actually sat there on all sides of the table. She has sat there as a teacher. She has sat as an admin working as a principal, and then she's also been there as a parent of a special needs student. And she will be the first to tell you the perspective of all 3 of those positions is very, very different, okay? But remember that you are probably the most important person at that table, okay? So you're there to share what you know about your kid, their strengths, their challenges, what the school doesn't see, right? You're there to ensure that the goals that are set are measurable and data-driven. And goals are a really important part of the ARD process. And we'll probably do a whole other series later on about goals. But really, the key thing that you want to be asking as the parent in that position is, what prompted this goal? What is the ultimate objective we're working towards, and how are we measuring progress? And really asking that helps to make sure that we are looking at data that's not just copy and pasted from another kid's stuff. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't happen, but why, okay? Why did we choose this goal? What prompted this goal? And mostly making sure that everything that we're looking at is data driven, okay? we cannot just put goals willy-nilly. We really want to know why in that whole thing, okay? And from the school side of it, their role is to present that data and present the evaluation and all the progress reports and show the parent why, how they got there, okay? They're there to propose the goals and the accommodations and explain all of that. And then their job is to actually implement the final decision, okay? But the parent really should be driving a lot of the Q&A that helps get us and navigates us there. Okay. So let's talk about timelines, because this is a really common misconception around the ARD process, and we really want to make sure that everybody understands where we are. So when you're initiating the entire process, so the FIE, so the full individual evaluation, we want to make sure first and foremost that this request initially comes in writing from you, okay? And that is, if SEPAC can teach parents anything, it is best practice is to put everything in writing. And then if something does come up in a phone call, you want to make sure you want to follow that up in an email in writing so that there is a paper trail at all times, okay? Because the minute that something comes in writing, okay, we really want to make sure that you can see that from the moment that you request in writing the FIE, the school has 15 school days to respond, pull you in, and get the initial parent consent, because the school actually will not start doing any kind of testing or anything until they have your written consent, okay? When possible, we really do encourage parents go into the building to give them the written consent. Say, hey, no, I will come in person. We've heard a lot of stories, and we were talking Tuesday night about how the school will offer to mail something home, or we send something home with kids. I don't know about your kids' backpacks. They turn into the black hole abyss sometimes. When possible, we know it's sometimes easier said than done, but when possible, really try to cut out that middleman and go in person to sign that written parent consent. You can do a really quick meeting with your ARD team to do that. A formal meeting is not even really required, okay? The comprehensive assessment has to be completed within 45 school days of receiving that written parent consent, okay? And then after the report is completed, or after the assessments are completed, they have to meet and schedule the ARD within 30 calendar days after the report is completed, okay? So you can start to see how the timeline can get stretched very, very easily. If you're requesting an FIE or an ARD or an evaluation in, let's say, August, very, very rare that you'll actually get a meeting before Christmas. By the time you tack in all of the school holidays and the weekends and everything else, this timeline can really expand very, very quickly, okay? One thing you're also going to remember is that an ARD meeting is going to be held at least once every 12 months to review progress and update the goals. We want to make sure goals change every time for that meeting, and that we're looking at progress reports every 9 weeks, okay? And then you'll have a 3-year reevaluation. So a comprehensive reevaluation of everything has to occur at least every 3 years, but you can call that sooner if you have the appropriate reasoning behind that, okay? And you can always put that in as a written request, okay? The school can at sometimes deny that request, but they need to put that in writing, and then you as a parent can challenge that, and you can elevate that to district as necessary. Which leads me to my next thing. You can call an ARD at any time, okay? If you have any concerns about your kids' progress, services, accommodation, placement, where they're at, you do not have to wait for that annual review. And I know if you're like me, a lot of us, our annual review happens in May, okay? If I have concerns, I'm not going to wait that long. You can request multiple ARD meetings throughout the year. If you feel like it's really emergent, you can actually call an emergency ARD to try and shorten that timeline when they can meet with you. But if you feel like services are not being implemented appropriately, appropriate accommodations are not being implemented, if you feel like there are major life things that are affecting where your kid's at, okay, we've had major surgeries in my house, we've had other things, complications going on, call the ARD, Okay, it's better to be proactive than reactive. Okay, anytime you are concerned, um, and then the school has to respond to your request and either schedule a meeting. And then if they deny the meeting, which can happen, they cannot legally deny the ARD, but they have to put in writing what your options are. And so they might deny an ARD based on why you're calling the ARD, but they have to give you another option like mediation or dispute resolution. At that point, things get escalated up to the district level. But I would say 99% of the time when you call an ARD, the school is going to accommodate and put that in. Again, I really do stress that parents put this in writing as well, that you are requesting it, because I know even myself, I have actually called to request an ARD. I've been told, oh, well, we really don't need to do a whole ARD. And I followed up with an email immediately. Said, I requested an ARD today, and you said we didn't need to call an ARD, though, according to, you know, TAC 89.1050, and here that I can call an ARD at any time when I want a review of the IEP and I want a review of accommodations and placement. And in the case that I had called an ARD, I wanted to review her placement. At the time, she was 100% in the life skills program, and I didn't feel like that was a completely appropriate environment for her full time. So you are the president of this board, okay? You can call a meeting. And when you have issues, we really want to stress that you have the power to elevate the district when needed. When we always, now there are appropriate steps, right? Start on campus, okay? Start with your children's teachers, start with your child's campus administrators. But when those relationships start to break down, when that is just simply not working, it's better to call in somebody, because district representatives really do stress that they want to be proactive, again, not reactive, okay? And if their involvement helps neutralize the situation from the beginning, we would much rather see it at that point before it goes to any sort of even mediation or due process or anything, or to the TEA level, right? District representatives can actually come to ARD meetings to provide additional oversight and support. Almost all of us as board members have had to call in this option, and we can tell you that the tone of those meetings are significantly different with district support there than they are without, okay? It is a parent-initiated request, though, so you have to be the one to request district involvement. That is not going to be just offered by your campus, okay? So you can contact your special education director. Do not hesitate to CC the ladies at Dr. Wiggins' office. At each level of schools has an assistant superintendent. You absolutely can CC those people as well. Their information is on the district website. We're actually working as SEPAC to kind of create a quick, easy PDF for families to have this contact information more readily available. So again, look on our website for that, but you absolutely can do that. And then of course, when do you elevate things? Okay, when you are facing persistent disagreements, when you are facing persistent implementation issues, or if you have complex placement decisions. Complex placement decisions are when your kid is in more of a hybrid program, or has more of hybrid needs. I know that often we'd like to kind of pigeonhole kids into they're all life skills, or they're all resource, or they're all gen ed. And the fact of the matter is it's individualized for a reason. And if you're getting any kind of pushback on that, really do encourage you to reach out to district. If you keep having the exact same meetings with administrators over and over and over and over again, it's kind of one of those fool me once, shame on me, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I really would encourage people not to let things drag out too hard for your frustration level, the campus frustration level, and the district ultimately, okay? Again, the earlier we can kind of nip some of these things in the bud, the better, okay? And that leads us to our next thing. If you are in an ARD meeting, you do not have to sign if you disagree, okay? Your signature matters. Never feel pressure to sign the IEP if you don't fully agree with the proposed accommodations or the services. Your signature indicates consent, okay? At that time, you can file a formal disagreement, which is a protected right and an important advocacy tool. So if at the end of your ARD meeting, you do not come to an agreement, okay, you have to include instead a statement of the basis of the disagreement, and each person, including parent, or if there's a teacher in there that disagrees with a certain placement, they are entitled to include their own statement of disagreement, okay? And when a mutual agreement is not achieved, they have to give an opportunity to recess and reconvene within 10 school days, unless both sides agree otherwise. And so a lot of this can come down to maybe we don't agree with placement, or we don't agree with a goal or accommodation. Again, this is why it's really asked to understand like what sort of data is driving this goal. If they cannot produce the data, you can say, I don't agree with this. That gives them 10 days to go back and pull the data as necessary, and show you one way or the other. Likewise, it gives you 10 days to pull the appropriate data to show one way or the other why you agree or why you do not disagree. So it's required a minimum of 10 school days. Again, both sides might agree longer depending on what it is that we're asking. I've actually given a 30-day consent just so I think we need like a little extra time to pull the appropriate resources and information, but make sure you put that in writing and everybody signs off on that as well. Request a draft IEP be provided to you in advance. Best practices is that we ask that schools provide things to you 5 days prior to the ARD. That gives you the appropriate time to review things, look at things carefully. There's some back and forth on whether or not this is law. This is actually I've heard it both ways, I'll be honest. I've heard that it is required legally to be provided to parents 5 days ahead of time. In my own research, I found that that's just a best practice thing. Regardless, if you do not feel like you have enough time to review the information, if you do not feel they gave you a reasonable amount of time to review those documents to be able to come informed and be able to be effective, and give you the opportunity to maybe consult with other professionals outside of it, whether it's an advocate or a therapist, or in our case, our neuro team, or give you the opportunity to do your appropriate research. Schools are required to give you the appropriate time and materials so that you can have meaningful participation in the ARD process. Again, this is not them talking at you. This is talking with you being the final decision maker here. You need to have the appropriate time to be able to review those documents, look at the goals, and understand and ask the appropriate questions. Because when you're doing that, I will say most of our ARD meetings are actually very quick, because by the time we have come to the table, this has already been agreed upon, cussed and discussed and decided, okay? We don't want to wait for the day of to be arguing and disagreeing and going back and forth over those things. Though that does happen, we just want to be able to have the time to review all of the information appropriately far ahead of time. If you are not giving these documents ahead of time, you absolutely have the right to ask for a reschedule of the meeting in order to have more time to prepare. All right, so deliberations. So deliberations are your child's official written record. They happen at the end of the ARD document, okay? So it's the official written record of the decisions made during that meeting, okay? They explain what was decided, why the decisions are made, and the data that was informed to reach them, okay? Oftentimes, I've seen DIAGs often will take deliberations. Sometimes it's the special education teacher in the room, but somebody has access to this end document, and they're basically taking, it's like real life notes within your meeting, okay? There's a meeting summary, so a snapshot of key discussions and outcomes. So if there were any kind of disagreements or anything that came up in that meeting, if a parent was upset about anything, those should be reflected in the ARD, okay? It's kind of your reasoning document, okay? It gives kind of the logic behind the services, goals, and accommodations. So because the IEP is a legal document that follows your child, we want to make sure that this is more of the representation of your child as a whole, right? Okay, and it really should reflect your voice, okay? If you had any questions that came up during that ARD meeting, it should be reflected in deliberations, as well as the answer that was arised by that concern or that question, okay? If you had any special requests or disagreements or really important points that you wanted to share in that ARD meeting, it should be reflected in deliberations, okay? It gives everybody a much clearer record of the decision-making process, okay? So again, if somebody that was outside of that room is going to understand not just what the goal is, but how and why we came to that decision, okay? So Texas requires that our deliberations include the summary of decisions, the reasons for decisions, the parent input, follow-up actions, and implementation agreements. Those deliberations need to be read aloud and agreed upon before you sign that ARD document. And we're going to talk about making sure everybody has access to that to read it through ahead of time, but it is a part of the official education record. Okay, so we really want to make sure that these are well thought through, especially if you have any kind of questions or concerns, because we want those to be on record, okay? Now let's talk about the power parent input. Like, again, I know we keep driving this home, but there is also a parent input section separate in the IEP that is your opportunity to share ahead of time knowledge about your child, okay? You are, Waylon had said this on our Tuesday night meeting, and she is dead on correct. You are the subject matter expert of your child, okay? This section, just like the input that the teacher observations, of your general education teacher's observations, the special education, the counselor's observations, all of those are also put in there, but you know your child more than anybody else in that room does, okay? You want to include in that area your child's strengths, okay? What their learning style is that you have observed. Is there any relevant medical history that can impact the educational environment? What works at home, concerns, and any hopes they have for the future, okay? What is your main priority out of the educational experience for your child, okay? You're going to give input that the testing and the FIE is just not going to capture, okay? And it helps us understand the whole child, not just these bullet point data points, because often the person that's testing your child never spends any meaningful time with your kid. Testing is often done by the diag at school or an outside diagnostician who's never met your child before, okay? Be very specific with examples that you want to give in there. You can bring in photos, work samples, or even outside evaluations that support your observations. So an example that was given Tuesday night was, a lot of times we see our kids hold things really, really well together, but then they come home and they are just completely dysregulated and melting down. That really needs to be put in there because that tells us that they really do need more educational support. And that data is not supported by any evidence that the teachers are seeing at school, because at school, the kid is holding it together perfectly, okay? But with some extra supports at school, maybe we can help mitigate some of those meltdowns at home, okay? Again, your equal ARD member, your viewpoint, your observations, they matter. And without that information, we can't make with your information that you provide, we as the ARD committee can make a more well-informed decision. All right, the last thing, it is a request, it is not required, but my goodness, make sure that the IEP is projected during the meeting. I know that if we're in a Zoom often as well, just make sure that we're sharing the ARD document in the screen on the Zoom call. But we want to make sure that ARD participants can all view the document simultaneously as changes are being made in real time and as things are updated. This ensures transparency. Everybody can see what is being written and how. Accuracy. sometimes there are nuances or there are different ways to say things that better convey our meaning. So we would just want to make sure if I have a concern and that concern is getting recorded in the deliberations, that my concern is accurately reflected through my lens, not through the lens of the person taking notes. Okay. So when I've had it even written up there, I can't remember the specific example, but I was able to raise my hand and say, you know what, that's not exactly what I meant by that. What I meant was this. And we're able to change some of the language and the wording, because we want to make sure anybody that reads these documents after the fact has a very, very clear understanding of what happened in that meeting, what my tone was, what the school's tone was. Everything can be reflected very accurately. Nothing can be glossed over if necessary. And again, make sure that there's complete clarity, okay? But it also gives everybody the opportunity for collaboration. Again, this gives you the opportunity to make sure you're not being spoken to, but you'll be spoken with, okay? If it's not projected, just politely request that it's made visible to all participants. It's an incredibly reasonable accommodation that makes sure that there's better communication, and it is absolutely a request that is supported by TEA family engagement guidance. All right. As always, thank you guys so much for hanging to the end of this presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to our team. There are no wrong questions. That is 100% why SEPAC is here, is to support families along the way. And then we want to invite your communities. This QR code actually links to our ability for you to submit your stories to our website. But again, please attend our meetings and our workshops. Make sure that you join SEPAC formally through our website so you have access to the resources and educational materials. Share your story via this QR code so we can help connect you with families. We can help you really advocate for meaningful change at the district level, because I think if we can make things better, not just for our kids, we're making things better for all kids. So thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your week, and happy Thanksgiving. Bye, everyone.